Now, the Indian Space Research Organisation launched its newest military communication satellite from Sriharikota in the southern Indian state of Andhra Pradesh. The communication satellite will help connect all assets of the Indian Air Force, such as planes, control platforms, drones and ground stations. The GSAT-7A is the 17th and the last mission of the Indian Space Agency for the year 2018 and the 69th mission to be launched from Sriharikota. ISRO has designed the GSAT-7A satellite in such a manner that it could last 8 years. The satellite is a military communication satellite and will be solely operated by the Indian Air Force. The satellite will help the Indian Air Force to interlink ground radar stations, air bases and airborne early warning and control systems for aircrafts. The satellite will also be used to maintain and manage the Indian Army's unmanned aerial vehicle operations. This will be ISRO's last mission for 2018. Well, the European Union has agreed to slash carbon emissions from new cars by 2030. The European Union has agreed to cut carbon emissions from cars by 37.5% in the next decade. The member countries of the European Union said that the decision would help the bloc meet its commitments under the Paris Climate Accord. Now, cars sold in 2030 will have to emit 37.5% less carbon dioxide on average as compared to the levels of emission in 2021, and for other vehicles the emissions will have to be 31% lower. This comes despite industry concerns that the targets are quote-unquote totally unrealistic.
The 37.5% CO2 reduction target as proposed now by the environment ministers and the European Parliament is going to be, in our opinion, too ambitious and not realistic based on the facts we know today. On top, it will have major implications on jobs, because the higher targets mean we have to move much faster towards electrification in the near future, which will inevitably mean we have to reorganize our production units, our plants, which will have an impact on jobs, because you need, in principle, less people to produce electric vehicles than fuel combustion cars.
And well, the 28-nation bloc has been divided for months over the strict about this, of course, should the carbon emissions from vehicles be reduced to this. The ultimate goal is, of course, to reduce overall greenhouse gases by 40% by 2030. Activists have said that the deal was a fair one.
It's a fair compromise. It's not everything that we hoped for. The car industry have got some significant weakenings introduced into the legislation, particularly around the way that plug-in hybrid vehicles will be counted and double counting sales of battery electric and plug-in hybrid vehicles in Eastern Europe in particular. We would have liked to have seen stronger real-world checks, but overall the emissions reduction should ensure that around a third of the cars are electric or by 2030.
And joining us to talk a little bit more about this is Kevin Ospec, who joins us from Brussels. And Kevin, thanks for talking to us this evening. Now, many people say that this is an extremely unrealistic target to cut emissions by 37.5% by 2030. And this, of course, even as we saw, in COP24, that there were disagreements at so many levels on so many things regarding climate change.
Yeah, it seems with this particular initiative from the EU, no one's really all that happy about it. You have car makers that say this is completely unrealistic, that it's going to create a seismic shift when it comes to the number of people here on this continent that's employed by the car making industry. And then you have environmental groups saying, well, really, the EU isn't doing enough here, even by targeting cars and by trying to lower emissions in new cars by 37.5%. That still is not going to get the EU in compliance with the Paris Climate Accord. So really, the EU isn't pleasing many people with this one.
Right. Kevin, well, stay with us. You know, the other big story, of course, coming out of is from Belgium and the rising anti-migrant and nationalistic sentiment that has led to the collapse of another government in Europe. And the Belgian Prime Minister, of course, Charles Michel, has resigned from 5 months ahead of the elections. The resignation follows the exit of the biggest party in his coalition over the United Nations Pact on International Migration. The King is likely to call him today, of course, to lead a caretaker government until a new government is sworn in. And Kevin, of course, we are seeing the impact of migration at so many levels, and now the Prime Minister of Belgium has had to step down after immense pressure from within political parties in Belgium.
Well, a few things to note here. The King of Belgium hasn't actually accepted his resignation yet. So right now, the King is meeting with the leaders of the various parties. He's trying to gauge their appetite if we should hold early elections in this country, or if Charles Michel should remain essentially a lame duck prime minister until elections are scheduled, which is the very end of May. What's important to note here is that Charles Michel was kind of brought down by not just Flemish nationalists, but also other parties in the parliament, including the Flemish Socialists and the Green Party. So those on the opposite end of the spectrum, they're the ones that pushed for the vote of no confidence, and they're the reason why he didn't get that vote of confidence to hold a minority government. So the future of Charles Michel in doubt right now. We don't know if his days are ticking down and they're numbered, or if he'll hold on to that position and lead the government for a few more months.
Right, Kevin, thanks very much indeed for joining us with the latest there on the Belgian Prime Minister's fate, which hangs in the balance. Well, protest headache is escalating for the French government after handling 5 straight disruptive weeks of protests. It is the police force that is now taking a turn to express anger at the government. 2 police unions have threatened to strike. The unions are seeking better working conditions and payment for over thousands of hours of unpaid overtime work accumulated over the years.
C'est toujours dans le 16e, non, c'est dans le 8e maintenant.
Conditions de travail, d'abord de ces dernières semaines, mais globalement depuis de longues années, de nos forces de sécurité en France n'ont pas été à la hauteur dans nos engagements de ce qu'elles font au quotidien.
Nos policiers, Monsieur le Premier ministre, attendent des actes. Ils expriment aujourd'hui, vous le savez, un profond malaise et une colère tout aussi profonde. 63 policiers et gendarmes se sont suicidés depuis le début de l'année 2018. Ils sont sous pression du terrorisme, sous pression de la violence, sous pression des manifestations, sous pression des flux migratoires.
Pensioners and students have also hit the streets in separate protests against reforms by the French government. The pensioners complain that new reforms mean a later retirement and lower income, while the youth claim that the new system of admission to the university creates inequality. Hundreds of students marched against the different reforms taking place in French high schools. Students say that the new selection platform for university admissions are unfair, accusing it of being based on geographical status, thus preventing poor status for the city suburbs from entering universities located in city centres.
Je suis là surtout pour les menaces futures, parce que la retraite à point, on n'en veut pas, quoi. Hein. C'est un slogan, mais c'est la vérité. Ça sera le travail sans fin, parce que on n'aura jamais le nombre de points suffisants. On va multiplier le nombre d'années de travail. Et surtout, il n'y a aucune garantie quand on prend la retraite du revenu qu'on va avoir, puisque le point, c'est le monarque qui décide de la valeur du point selon l'économie du moment.